Hello, Facebook and YouTube, our new followers. I want to welcome you here tonight with our normal Facebook landlord chat. So tonight we're going to cover a couple of things. One, we're going to get to know Dean Curtis, and we're going to get to know Sharon. Well, trying to stop my phone from dinging for you guys tonight. And we're going to be able to get to know these two fantastic individuals. We're going to talk about the Landlord and Tenant Board, the changes that are happening. That is including the taking a former tenant to the Landlord and Tenant Board, the changes that are happening with the N12 and the N13s at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And we're also going to be able to share a hearing situation, a hearing case that happened to Sharon. We're going to dive deep into that situation of how the application, how it transpired, what happened, because it's literally, this is why I really wanted to do a Facebook Live with you tonight, to really discuss this in particular case. It's not even my case. I'm losing sleep over, so I don't even know how Sharon is feeling. And I really want to bring this to you for education purposes, and also to have our elected officials or media, if anyone who's tuning in, to understand how broken our Landlord and Tenant Board system is and how that is affecting the housing crisis. Ontario Landlords Watch started in 2010 when the City of Cambridge made landlords responsible for their tenants' delinquent utility bills. Through that time of advocacy and trying to stop landlords from being responsible for their tenants' delinquent utility bills, a lot of our landlords in the rental community had, voiced their concerns to me regarding the Residential and Tenancy Act and the Landlord and Tenant Board and how broken it was. That's when I've taken a deep dive into the issues and trying to work together with the group members in order to try to figure out a better solution to create that fair and balanced housing system for landlords and tenants and taxpayers. And so when we go through our lobbying efforts and what we've done throughout the 10 years, and obviously it's government, it's not going to happen very quickly. We just know that we cannot just sit back and allow these changes to happen without our consultation, without our input, and being able to make our housing community a lot stronger. And this is why Ontario Landlords Watch Members Group is a way for us to help each other out with that day-to-day questions about management of their tenants, helping them navigate through the Landlord and Tenant Board, sharing different products and services to the landlords community and the real estate community in order to help us be better landlords, and making sure that we're giving you the news of what's happening from the government, from federal, provincial, and municipal, and a way for us to teach you how to get involved and how to advocate. I can't see that, a lot of people are like, hey, we need a class action lawsuit. And I'm looking at the concept that I spoke with 3 lawyers throughout my time, and each and every one of them has stated that you're best off at lobbying the government. You have power in numbers. And this is a concept that we have big organizations that have been operating for quite some time. And if anything was going to happen from a class action, it was going to happen through that in particular situation of them having the manpower and representing big landlords and big property management companies. So if we can just have a concept of, we have big landlords, we have small landlords, and we have good tenants and we have bad tenants, and we need to know that there is got to be a better system. And we know that the Landlord and Tenant Board is making these changes at the Landlord and Tenant Board, but are they making the changes that we really want them to make? So before we dive deep into the changes of what's happening at the Landlord and Tenant Board, I want Dean to come on and to introduce himself to you, so you know who's going to be going back and forth with me tonight in order to give some context to these new changes and getting our commentary of what's happening, as well as getting to know Sharon and her background and getting to have her take on these changes at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And then we're going to dive deep into her situation, because I think everyone's going to be able to learn something very valuable about this experience that she's going through right now. And this is what it's all about. It's about that educational part. So Dean, thank you so much for tuning in and being here tonight and getting to know the members who are on our public page, our YouTube, and of course my personal page. And take the floor.
Well, thanks, Kayla, and thanks for having me here. I'm super excited for the talk tonight. I'm really excited to hear Sharon's story. Kayla gave me a little bit, but I told her on purpose not to tell me too much about it because I wanted to hear it all firsthand. But so I'm a landlord myself, first and foremost. I started 30 years ago was when I first started buying properties. Had some bad experiences with tenants back then. got out of housing for a while, sold all my properties because I was just frustrated, took a few years off, and now I'm back into investing again. Currently have 12 properties, all different formats of investments. I have some student rentals, I have a fourplex, a few homes that we just rent out to families. We have a few homes that we've turned into duplexes, up and down duplexes, and we're renting out the upper and lower unit. So that has kind of, having that background and having the previous experience, I wanted to make sure I wasn't making the same mistakes this time that I was back then. So I was looking into the Landlord Tenant Board and the Act and trying to learn as much as I could about it, what I could do if a tenant wasn't paying rent, all that sort of thing. I'm also a real estate agent here in Guelph, and I service mostly real estate investors in a pretty big area because I'm an advocate that I think people should invest where the numbers make sense and not necessarily in the town that you actually live in. So because I was studying the cities myself for my own investments, I just found it an easy transition to help out people buying homes and making those purchases as well. So for my own investments and for my clients, I've kind of made it my business to try and learn as much as I can about the process, the eviction process, the forms that need to be used, just so that I can educate my clients and just be better prepared for anything that comes down the road. So I did include, you'll notice at the bottom here, instead of my name, Dean Curtis, I actually put my handle there. If anybody's on Instagram wanted to follow me, and the reason why I'm promoting that is because I actually post a lot of the ups and downs of myself as a landlord. So, things that are going well, and when there's leaky toilets and bad tenants, I like to post that as well. So it gives you a real firsthand of, the ups and downs of a landlord looking after 12 properties and hoping to expand to more. But that's myself in a nutshell, Kayla.
Oh, and honestly, guys, his feed is great. His videos are great. He's sharing some very, very valuable, real estate investment material from books that, you should really, and I actually, I'm not much of a reader, but as soon as I seen you had posted one of your books there, I'm like, oh my God, like I picked it up, I started reading it, and you're actually got me reading based on what you're being able, and that's what it is. It's about networking. If you're into real estate, the biggest thing that you can do is grow your network, grow your team. And that's a great way to have Dean on your team as well. So definitely give him a follow on Instagram. And I know I love all of the stuff that he does, and I know you will like it too. Thank you, Dean, so much for sharing that, a little bit of information about yourself. And then we have Sharon. Thank you so much, Sharon, for coming on and sharing your story. But before we share your story, don't give it anything out yet. That's like before I have to log off, I gotta, Anyone, before Sharon starts speaking about her story, go get your choice of beverage because you're going to need it for her. Thank you, Sharon, for coming on tonight.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me, Kayla. My name is Sharon Batchelor, and my husband and I are investors. We're very small investors in the real estate market. And my educational background is in accounting, and his is engineering. And both of us work as consultants. So we don't have a pension from companies. So we decided to invest in real estate because it's kind of our nest egg for the future. We want to make sure that someday we can pay off our home, our principal residence, and that we'll have enough money that we can retire without having to rely on the government or someone else to carry us through to the end of our days. My parents were immigrants. They came here in the early 60s, and they taught me the importance of real estate. And I'm really glad we started investing. Unlike Dean, we only have a few properties. When I met my husband, we'd been married for about 10 years. He had one real estate property, and I had one real estate property. So we had the same interests and the same ideas. And since then, I guess at any given time, the most properties I think we've owned is 4. Some we rent out, and one of them actually my daughter lives in, because we all know that in this market today is really difficult for the young people to acquire real estate. So if we can help them, we do. So that's how we got into real estate, and why I think it's really important for us anyway.
That's great. And that's what it is. It's about that financial freedom. It's about not having to rely on the government, and we don't have that security, because I know that our senior population right now, that is becoming the face of the homelessness. Because they didn't have that type of way of investing, or they don't have enough money now that comes in through their pensions for the government, at least, in order to be able to, be able to afford their accommodations. And that's pretty sad that,
Right.
We live in such a great country in order to see that we're not being able to take care of our seniors, and this is why we educate ourselves on real estate and how it can protect us. But when that real estate is now, constantly changing now, and it's not in the favor of the investor, which the investor, you would assume that you try to help them so that they continue to grow and to continue to provide more rental properties to the community. But instead, we have the opposite happening, where we have more landlords selling their single family homes and their duplexes, or in order to convert them back into a single family home, because they're done. They've been burnt by the system. The system is still continuing to be broken. And we've had Bill 184. Bill 184 is obviously the part that we dive very deep into, consult with the government to give them our thoughts and our opinions on what they should change. And when they came out with Bill 184, it really highlighted the punishment of an N12 and an N13, a punishment that would come if you were caught doing an eviction unlawfully. And now that, the new changes that are coming at the Landlord and Tenant Board, that's about getting that Bill 184 into their rules and procedures, and now being able to adapt that into a broken system that they can't even deal with now. So we'll dive deep into the concept of an L10 application. So we had the opportunity to consult with them back and forth, explaining to them, like, this should be changed on the form, or this is what needs to happen. But again, an L10 application is now where a landlord can take a former tenant to the Landlord and Tenant Board to for either rent of unpaid rent, for unpaid utilities, or for damages, or even if the tenant has caused some substantially interfere with the landlord's reasonable enjoyment. Let's say they pull the fire alarm and you got charged, that is the type of fees that you can still go after that former tenant at the Landlord and Tenant Board 1 year after they leave. Now we think, wow, this is great. Well, not so much, because one, you have this concept that we already have a huge backlog that they're still trying to address. They got it down from 12 months, which is great, but we have a concept where an L10 application is a landlord has to serve those documents to their former tenant. And everyone knows when the tenant is gone, there's no forwarding address. There's not quite many different services out there that we can track this tenant down at their new address in order to serve them type of documents. And even if you do have this opportunity to serve your tenant an L10 application, you now have to print out your certificate of service. And this is where, the Landlord and Tenant Board is making things complicated. Once again, we already have 2 certificate of services now. One is for current tenants, and now the other one's for former tenants. So how many mistakes is going to happen where the landlord prints off a former certificate of service or a current certificate of service, and now it's going to be thrown out based on the type of certificate of service. And then you talk about the serving mechanism of serving them at their current address or serving the tenant personally. And then they have a part on the certificate of service. As anyone's on their computer now, Google the certificate of service for the former tenant. It will give you the option of by email with the email address below. And then it will state that during the tenancy, the former tenant has agreed in writing to receive the document by email. So as you see on your standard lease, there's a spot there that the tenant can say, yes, we can communicate, here's my email. But then there's also a form on the Landlord and Tenant Board underneath the tenant forms where the tenant is giving consent to communicate by email. So every landlord should always have that form printed off, included within their lease, in order to make sure that you have that communication so that you are able to communicate and give a certain type of documents to your tenant, current or former, because you're going to need it. And then number 2, it says you can prove the former tenants receive the document. So we have, I'm sure you guys can help me. I haven't done it myself, but when you're sending someone an email and you want to get notified that they have opened it, and so before they open it, they say the sender is going to be notified that you open this. So all this needs to match, and it is on the certificate of service for the former tenants. But when you go into, if you can't find the current address and you can't serve the tenant in person, and obviously if you need to use alternative measures, alternative method, you need to print off that form So we're killing trees here, guys. You got a certificate of service, you got the alternative method of serving. So in order for me to figure out, well, I think my tenant's now at mom and dad's, and now I need to fill out an alternative service form, give it to the Landlord and Tenant Board. And you got to do that 40 days prior to the hearing and vouch why you feel your tenants are going to receive that document by giving that alternative method to the Landlord and Tenant Board. And the Landlord and Tenant Board has then approved of it to make sure that it's valid and it's going to be used. So everyone knows we're already waiting long hours for our and days and months for our orders. So I like to see how quick they're going to be getting the approval process for anyone who's wanting to do an alternative method. Now, before I get deep into the other stuff, what's your thoughts, guys? Like, you give me, you think it's great? You think there's a way around this, or is it just another money grab of having to pay $201 to the Landlord and Tenant Board on the hopes that you can just get a judgment that hopefully you can bring to the small claims court to garnish their wages if possible?
So, here's the way I look at it. I think I agree with everything that you said, 100%. And there's vast changes that still need to be made. I think that we have made baby steps, ever so small baby steps. And for years before that, there's been no movement forward. So I think this is, to me, it's my belief that these baby steps were only made because of the little bit of advocacy we've had from organizations such as Ontario Landlords Watch and other organizations. That's the only way we've been able to make these baby steps. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So we need to be more active and participate in these groups, because you know darn well the tenant advocacy groups, they're out there and they're singing loud to the politicians. We need to be a voice for the other side. We can see in other provinces that they're much more landlord friendly. We can see in a lot of states through the United States, a lot more landlord friendly. And I would argue that I think by being friendlier to landlords, and tenants aren't going to agree with me on this, but by being friendlier to landlords, it's going to improve the housing market for them.
Right.
How are we going to get rental prices down for these tenants? Well, what if there was a flood of rental housing because everybody wanted to be a landlord? It was so amazing. Everybody's renting out bedrooms. They're wanting to put in extra units in their home because I know I can easily rent it out. And if they're a terrible tenant, now I can easily evict them. So there's no worries. I'm going to go ahead and add additional housing for renters. And that, supply and demand, maybe the prices start to come down because everybody, anyhow, I'm on my soapbox here. I'm way off topic.
No. What it is. It leads into it. It's the bigger picture, right? And that's what
100%
are missing, is that bigger picture. They look at the now. They look at the Band-Aid solutions. They look at using taxpayers' money on, being able to fund overflow of the shelters, these emergency shelters. We have so much that, we could be just doing two different things at the same time instead of just trying to limit and restrict investors from doing what they do best. Because guess what? I don't know if anyone knows this, but the money is gone from our taxpayers. I don't know where you think taxpayers are going to keep building, managing, maintaining, and subsidizing government housing. We do need to partner with government, with private investors and the government. But when they want to partner, their incentives and that fine print, that is what you need to read. And that's why it's still a higher risk in order to partner with the government. So we want them to understand the issues, understand that we're not here about, doing a mass process of, evicting people. This is why the consultation part of dealing with the Landlord and Tenant Board and telling them, like, listen, like we're communicating with our tenants. We're coming to you now because the communication is broken. But at the same time, when we go to the Landlord and Tenant Board for a non-payment of rent, there's many government programs that are out there for rent relief or last month's rent deposit, but it's not well educated to the tenants and it's not accessible to the landlords. So we could be, utilizing those type of programs. So what did they do with Navigate Tribunals Ontario? They were able to now put that section in there. There's a link that if a tenant clicks on that, they haven't paid their rent, it will bring up some resources for that in particular tenant. And it will give them that link where they can find their local service manager and look for that rent relief. That was one thing that I was like, wow, because this is not about us against them. This is about the good landlords and the good tenants being really shafted on the system. And if you don't provide the type of relief and the type of protection, you're going to see the good landlords getting out of the industry. Your supply is going to cease to exist, and you're going to have our good tenants paying high prices and not be able to get into home ownership. Sharon, what's your thoughts?
I'm thinking that the importance of finding good tenants is it's so important. And we haven't really been to the Landlord and Tenant Board very often. We've had to do it twice. Once we had to do it in a situation where they hadn't paid their rent, and that process to get them out took us about 6 months before it was all completed. They would make an excuse and not show up. It would get delayed, and then they would get a later date to come to a hearing. So I think that it's important that the landlords know who their tenants are, do a proper review of them before they come in. And then the second time that we had to go to the Landlord Tenant Board was this time. So I'm not as well versed as I think some of you in how these forms play out, but my 2 experiences in dealing with the Landlord and Tenant Board as a landlord have not been the greatest. Yeah.
And that's the thing. When you look at how it's a simple process of, rules, there's got to be black and white. They make it so complicated. They make it really entwined, where many provinces have a system where it's landlords and tenants, there to discuss their issue, not this paralegal that's been hired by the landlord. And now you got free legal aid that's being offered to the tenants and not the landlords.
That's a problem.
I'm just like,
yeah.
What? And not all landlords are rich and not all tenants are poor, but we're putting that in there. And even if it's not, we have a case, you have a hearing, you're putting your paperwork forward, and this is what we're trying to do. But now that they're causing, former tenants, current tenants, they are obviously just trying to hire some more adjudicators, the lack of education that is being taught, to these adjudicators, and how there's no consistency for us to even go on. And based on your situation, Sharon, and I know we keep going back into that, but it really makes it look like no form that we have at the Landlord and Tenant Board now even matters compared to what you guys are dealing with. So now that we got ourselves into an L10 application, you have it 1 year after, you have to serve your tenant 30 days before the hearing. So obviously we talk about the struggles. I'm trying to serve that. Again, we get into the concept of serving the document at the current address and how difficult that is to find, and the regular mail, making sure you're putting in that 5-day business days, and you can only do the maximum amount of 35,000. So if you have anything more, it's pretty much like if you have an order coming for more than that, you're not going to be able to go into the court system to go get the rest. So it's pretty much like you're almost settling for that 35,000. Now that you get your concept into, okay, great, we struggled to deal with current tenants. Now we're definitely just going to struggle. I think the board's going to really be the ones to benefit off of these applications. That's going to be $201 just to file these applications. Mm-hmm. And now we have the N12. Anyone knows that, talking to our paralegals, they say, what is your number one application, through the pandemic? And a lot of them is that N12 application. Yep. And now they want to have the forms are now modified. They are now telling landlords that if you have served an N12 notice for other units, for other tenants, you need to now disclose that information to the Landlord and Tenant Board. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, can we not have hey, have you been evicted before underneath an N4? Can we have the tenant disclose that type of information to the Landlord and Tenant Board? How come it's always the landlord where you think that they're abusing it? And I've literally got to take part in an N12 application for one of our members in the group. And when you get to see how long they discuss an N12 application, the landlord had signed an affidavit swearing that they plan to move into it. They got an order already, but the tenant was still able to apply for a stay because they had from the time frame of them receiving that order and then the time frame of him being able to receive it was 18 days. So that they give him another kick at the bucket. And here it was a full hour in order to vouch that the landlord wants to move into this. I am going to move into this. And we have a process in place that says, if I don't move into it, one, you can indeed get fined up to $50,000 for an individual, $250,000 for a corporation. And now they're talking about general compensation to the tenant of 12 months worth of rent. So why are we spending taxpayers' dollars discussing that I want my place, I want to move into it, I know the punishment of that? How come we're spending that much time when there's other applications that are waiting and needing to be heard? And this is the type of platform that the Landlord and Tenant Board wants to have, is the landlord and tenants battling each other and them sitting there and trying to dispute it whenever they feel the need to.
And they wonder why there's not a huge housing supply for renters, right?
Right.
All of these complexities, you know. And for those of you out there that do not yet have a rental property, I hope we're not scaring the crap out of you here. Because for the most part, as Sharon said, if you screen them properly, make sure you do proper screening. For my 12 properties, you know, I have one that's occasionally late, and you know, for the most part, they're all fantastic. So, but it's important for us to be aware of, you know, what the consequences are if we do encounter a bad apple. This is all great, but you know, don't worry, they're not all 100% like this. So
no, we have our good tenants, right? We have our good tenants. They have an understanding. There's no problems. It's all good. But again, we do need to get that N12 application in now with the new form that's out there. Be cautious that don't file it on the e-file right now, is what we're being told. They are going to be working at Tribunals Ontario portal, and everything will be able to be uploaded by that e-file way with the N12. So right now it's a printout version.
do we know when that portal is going to be up?
They're saying the fall. It initially was supposed to be September 1st, but instead they came out with the L10 application and the new requirements for the N12 and the N13. Because even for the N13, you know, we have a lot of supply in our community across Canada that obviously is deteriorating, and it does need that work. So when they talk about renovictions, which, you know, when we don't have a lot of money sometimes to do the renovictions, you know, you're having to pay the tenant if they want to leave or if they don't want to leave. And then you have the renovations, you have the permits. But now it seems like the Landlord and Tenant Board is now really enforcing a permit in order to really make them interested in granting that eviction. It's like, have you ever tried to work with, you know, children in a house? Have you ever tried to work with all of your surroundings as you're trying to rip down a ceiling just to re-insulate it so it prevents that noise? Like, you want us to work around our tenants like this? Do we need a permit? No. So why are they really trying to enforce that? So what we're going to see is, you know, the only way for us to get around that now is if there was an order. So if you had a property standard order, or if the board ordered you to do these renovations, that's when you're now not going to have to pay these fees to the tenant based on that there was an order. So it's really creating this nasty relationship. It's creating these slumlord situations, and it's going to be like, why would I put it into it? And we got to take our ideas of, we have good landlords and good tenants, but for how many bad landlords do we have? Because initially landlords want to keep putting their money into a place. They want to be able to build that equity. They want to be able to, you know, get a refinance. And if the place looks like shit, it ain't going to get that money, right? So you want to be able to kind of put your money into your investment. And now the Landlord and Tenant Board is again making it even more difficult for landlords to want to put nice, safe, affordable units on there because they make it so difficult.
And in our case, we have a situation where the rent that we're collecting doesn't cover our costs. So when you have a situation where you want to update the place, but it's not really making any income on a day-to-day basis, sure, long-term you're going to get some capital gains when you can eventually sell it. But I think the expectations put on the landlords is pretty unbelievable. And some landlords who have owned a property for a long time may find themselves where they're providing subsidized housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you look at that, you look at people been there for a long time, and I get that concept, you know, they didn't move around, they should be able to have that security, but that's when our fairness of this rent increase, you know, I keep telling people, I feel like the government was like reading a Dr. Seuss book. What should the rent increase be for 2022? I don't know. How about 1.2? Like we just lost one. You know, you need to make up for that, guys. Like, but you know what? Our insurance went up. Our property taxes went up. Our fees for water and hydro and more, you know, consumption's happening because people were staying home. But you give these landlords 1.2. So yes, they will now start offloading that unit in order to build it somewhere else, in order to kind of keep the money working. It's a business, and that's what it's like profit's a bad name, right? And this is about profit being a bad name. We just need to let these investors go. We need to let them build. We need to create these secondary suites, because obviously we can't, the land, there's only so much land, and the cost to keep building on that land in itself is going to be higher. But I've talked to developers and I'm like, hey, developer, I want to know, how come you're not building affordable housing? They're like, well, first and foremost, when they get a plan and they're bringing it to the city and then they don't like something, so they got to go back to the drawing board, and they got to spend more money to go back to the drawing board. And then by the time that they can get shovels in the ground, you're at like 2 years, 3 years. So what was your building cost back then? And what is now? And you wonder why they don't have the ambition to work with the city, and they don't have the ambition to build affordable housing.
Right.
This is what our elected officials are crying for right now, because there is not enough affordable housing, and there's definitely not enough supportive housing, and we definitely don't have enough accessible housing.
Yeah.
Woo!
And
a 1.2% increase after a year of not being able to increase at all.
Right.
And one of my properties, I just wanted to share a quick story. One of my properties, I have a unit in it, and it was well under market rent. And I knew that buying it, right. So, but a lovely elderly lady living there, paying $500 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment.
Sure.
Again, nothing against her. Now she's been there a year. I was waiting to see what the increase was going to be. 1.2%, I'm able to raise her rent by $6 next year.
Right.
Her new rent is going to be $506. And there's no way for me to, and lovely lady, but I'm clearly not getting what it's worth to be able to pay the bills. And as you said, Kayla, like, our taxes have gone up, hydro bills have gone up, water bills have gone up, and there's no mechanism under the current forms or the current regulations. There's no mechanism for us to increase the rent, other than if there's some sort of a significant improvement to their living quarters, right? Like if we add a room, we add a bathroom, then we can go after a substantial increase. And not even a substantial increase. There's limits on that as well. I shouldn't even say that, but it just blows my mind. A year after a year of no increases, they come out with 1.2. And you nailed it. I can't remember whether it was you, Sharon, or Kayla that said it, where they're forcing us to provide subsidized housing is what's happening. And
the second property that we have was a new build. And in that particular property, it became available during COVID. So during COVID, there was a complete lack of tenants that were looking to move around, right? They were nervous about moving to a new place. And during that time frame, a lot of landlords like ourselves, that was also being subsidized because we had to lower the rent to get a good tenant. And then you're stuck with that rent that you've created moving forward. So I know people think that landlords are doing so great, but a lot of us are squeezing by. And we're hoping that in the long term, maybe we'll make some capital gains off of these things if we can.
And that's when you go back into the changes that they made again with the N1 application, and how if you were, normally if you didn't give that application, the N1 application to the tenant, showing them the increase, and you sent them a text, hey, your rent's going to go up, or here's a piece of paper, the tenant could actually fight that even years and years and years after and say, you didn't give me the proper rent increase, or you didn't give it to me on the proper form, so I want all my money back of what I sent you for that in particular rent increase. So now they're saying that if you give a rent increase, let's say if you rounded it up and it's not the full amount, or let's say you did $20 over, but if the tenant's paying that now for the next 12 months undisputed, that becomes the lawful rent. So it's like, are you trying to get us to do some shady stuff? Like, hey guys, it's $50. Okay, hopefully you just keep paying it for 12 months. Please, 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 please. That is the way. And then sometimes it's negotiations. Hey, I see that you need a new kitchen. Can we increase your rent, X amount of money? There has to be this more fairness instead of having this big brother trying to interfere, but we've got to have that black and white. And this is the concept when we are fighting for the sake of everybody, because our prices are now increasing. Once those tenants do leave, now they're increasing in order to cover our risk. And like you said in the beginning, Sharon, your important factor now ever, because of how broken the system is, how it's so slow on trying to get the same people who've been operating the Landlord and Tenant Board, now trying to change their vision of the Landlord and Tenant Board, you're getting the same thing. We have to get into that tenant screening. So when you are getting your tenants, guys, into your rental unit, putting that ad, making sure that you're telling them that you are doing the first and last month's rent, you're doing the credit check, and you're also doing a tenancy search with Landlord Credit Bureau, and that you're reporting their payments to Landlord Credit Bureau. This is going to attract the people who want to succeed. They're going to want to grow their credit. They're going to want to try to get their own house, and they're going to be able to do that. And your unit's now going to be more appealing to them because you're reporting their credit. Now, when you get to the screening process, there's even a way for you to check with their banking. They can give you the permission to do their Rentify, where you're going to be able to check their banking. So if they said that their rent is $1,500, and you can now pull it to see, is that $1,500 coming out every month? So these tools and these products and these services, they're coming out because they see the need and how important it is to do our tenant screening. So our government is going, hey, we want you to work with us. We want to be the person on your lease. We want to have the city's name on your lease. And everyone thinks, oh, wow, it's so great to have the city's name on the lease. It's with them. The rent is going to be guaranteed. They're going to cover our damages if anything damages are happening. And they're going to provide you with a mediator just in case communication breaks down. But when you get to see that fine print and knowing that if a tenant does, you and your tenant have a dispute, you go to the city, they have their dispute process, but the tenant can still apply to the board to figure out if their rights even now prolong that eviction process if need be. But again, we want to work with you, but we can't be dealing with people who are going to be obviously disrupting other tenants, not paying rent, causing damages. You're ruining the entire experience of everyone by putting a wrong system in place and expecting landlords to want to be a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I shook my head. Don't get me on the election, guys, because all those promises, I'm waiting for a unicorn to show up at my door and that pot of gold with the leprechaun, because these people are like, oh yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I'm like, do you not see what your province is doing? Do you not see what your municipality is doing? Like the region, do you see that you pass funds down, but there's a broken chain. And this is why you're never going to be able to address your affordable housing or your homelessness that is happening. You need the small landlords, they contribute over 50% of the housing stock. Mm-hmm. Why aren't you having them at your seating table? Why aren't you discussing your incentives, these programs that are designed to entice us to work with you? Why aren't you getting our opinion on it? And I know I've been very vocal about it. And I literally have to knock on their doors like, hi, I'm here to help. Would you like to discuss things? Because I can tell you that what's happening is that our community is now discriminating, and they are asking for everybody to, almost give their firstborn in order to become, because you're losing a lot if you get the wrong tenant inside of there. You lose a piece of you based on how you're being treated by that tenant, and how the system that is supposed to be there to give fairness and balance has obviously pushed you aside because you're a landlord and you're considered rich and greedy. Meanwhile, the tenants are there laughing away because they know the loopholes to get inside of there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm done with my rant, guys. For now, I'll have to do part 2 because I know I don't want to keep you guys on here too long, and I want Sharon to share and give you my thought process on this. So we're going to talk about what application she had filed and what had happened. So Sharon, you filed a Landlord and Tenant Board form of an N.
We filed an N11, but our original intent was to file an N12. So this tenant has been in the unit for more than 10 years. We had a good relationship with him in that he paid his rent every single month on time in the amount that was requested. We didn't want to just push him out. So we were having conversations with this tenant since 2019 about leaving the unit, because we have a 27-year-old daughter and a 32-year-old daughter now that we knew couldn't afford housing on their own. And we wanted them to sort of, move on and be able to be responsible for their own life. So this tenant said, no problem. Absolutely. I am also looking to buy my own property. I'll be out. This is your place. And if you need it for your children and my granddaughter as well, she's a single mom, I will get out. So we were trusting his word. My husband was trusting his word. And he kept delaying and delaying and delaying. So finally in 2021, in March, we thought we need to do something. So we went to speak to him again. And we said, look, we have two choices. We can give you an N12 and you'll have 60 days to vacate. And he said, no, that's not enough time. Well, we said, you know what? Well, the other option is we can give you an N11 and you can decide when you're going to vacate the unit. So we allowed him to choose his date that he would leave the unit, which was July 31st. And he didn't leave. So 2 days before he was supposed to leave, he filed a stay with the Landlord and Tenant Board, which kind of surprised us because we thought, okay, we're good. We're only 2 days away. He's going to be leaving the unit. He had multiple conversations with people in the actual building where the condo is. And he had confirmed with them that it was his intent to leave. But he got to speaking with someone at the Landlord and Tenant Board, which were giving him advice that completely slanted everything. And now he realized, I don't have to leave if I do these things that the Landlord and Tenant Board tell me to do. And this was the first time when I realized this is not a Landlord and Tenant Board. This is a tenant board, right? They are advocating for the tenants. And a tribunal is supposed to have a process that is fair. It's supposed to look at the evidence on both sides and then make a decision based on that. But that was not our experience at all. So it had to go to hearing. So you think about it. So 2019, we started talking about this. March of 2021, we serve him with an N11 at his request because he wants more time. And then he's still in the unit. He's still in the unit today. So we went to hearing last week and the judgment shocked us. Our witness case, first of all, there was no procedural matters that were discussed at the beginning of the hearing. It was an online hearing. It was the first time my husband had ever participated in an online hearing. No one explained to him how the hearing would be conducted or what was expected of him. We had filed all of our evidence. We had affidavits. My daughter had actually originally served the tenant with the N12.
N12 or N13?
Sorry, the N11, because we wanted him to see that we're not lying. My daughter really is going to be moving into this unit, and she really has a daughter, and she's a single mom making not that much above minimum wage, and she cannot afford her own rental property somewhere else, which literally leaves her homeless. She's living in the municipality. This particular property is in Cambridge, and she's working in Kitchener. We live in Mississauga. So that commute's nearly impossible. We were forced to sort of take our granddaughter in full time. Our granddaughter is separated from her mother because they don't have a place that they can afford in the place where my daughter is working. And I mean, it was a valid situation where, and it was all laid out in evidence. On the day of the hearing, the adjudicator decided that the witness was not going to be able to speak. So basically all of our evidence was ignored. And the reason the witness was not going to be able to speak is because the witness was in the room when the hearing started. However, they never discussed that with any of these, they never discussed that with my husband or my daughter in advance in the procedural matters at the beginning. So they didn't know that. So I just felt like the whole hearing was just a farce. And she zoned in on one little thing. So what she did is when our tenant is not the most articulate, but he is educated. And he does have a driver's license, which means that you can't have a driver's license unless you can read, right? You have to write a written test, right? She never asked him any of those questions. She never asked him, do do you have a driver's license? She never asked him, what is the highest level of education that you have? The tenant suggested in a way that he can't read and he can't write. So he never understood any of the notices we gave him. He didn't know what he was signing. It was complete lies, because we had had conversations with him multiple times on the phone. We had text messages, but in the text message, one of my husband's text messages that he sent referred to a rental form. And the reason he used the word rental form is because the tenant is, he wouldn't necessarily know what an N11 was. He had received an N11.
What a rental form was than an N11. So
right.
Put that out there.
An N11 is one of the forms that we use when we're renting out properties. It is one of the rental forms, right?
The landlord and the tenant agreeing to, it's a legal binding form, and this
absolutely
clearly signed it. This is something where, you know, he's an adult, he needs to be an adult. He signed this form and then went to the landlord and tenant board, and she is now has completely declined.
Disregarded.
She declined it. And this is where we go, what went wrong? What went wrong was that, one, the witness should have been able to say that, you know, she's there, she's been a part of the concept of being served, should be able to get there to see. Number two is that the concept of the landlord and tenant board having an N11 that is legal and binding, and now all of a sudden that doesn't matter anymore based on whatever excuse the tenant can come up with. And knowing that the tenant was there for 10 years, and he stated to the landlord and tenant board that he thought it was a rental renewal, that why would you renew your rental application after 10 years, after multiple conversations explaining that you're going to have to leave? But again, he got legal aid. He was able to get this information of how to explain, how to get it thrown out. But we would assuming that our landlord and tenant, our adjudicator, who could have said, okay, sir, I see that you might have had some kind of confusion, and you did have someone, or it's a he said, she said, that someone was there, obviously explaining this stuff to him. But why wouldn't she just give him an extra month to find a new spot? Why give him an extra 60 days to find a new month?
Right. And that he said, she said was, if they had just allowed the witness to speak, our witness, it would have been clear that there was no he said, she said. His daughter was present when the form was given to him. And if his daughter can read, like, it was honestly, it was like kangaroo court. I've never seen anything like this. There was no fairness in this hearing at all.
And now if they look at
it, was not even considered. She already had determined what she was planning to do, I believe, before we went in the hearing.
And when you tell me this story, and I'm trying to help Sharon out in navigating this kangaroo court system, and you go back and you look at this in particular adjudicator, and this adjudicator is a former member of the Social Benefits of Tribunal. She's with the Canadian Bankers Association, the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, and also a treasurer for Supportive Housing in Peel, and a member of the Community Advisory Committee for the Trillium Health Center. How could we not see that the adjudicators that this is not the first case that I've ever witnessed where an adjudicator is not even following their own rules and procedures of what's happening at the landlord and tenant board. But when you dig deep into what they are and what they do and what their previous experience is, that they're taking that and they're bringing it into the landlord and tenant board.
Right.
And it's almost like, I wish now that it's online and everyone can view it, I wish there was like, everyone is on there listening, let's vote. Eviction or non-eviction, delay or not, like there has to be some balance, and there's no balance with
no balance. Yes.
And even for that N12 application that you now have to serve, instead of going with it, because obviously he's not going to sign another N11. So now you're going to go ahead and do an N12. You serve that N12. You now have to wait to the first of the month in order to serve him. So now he's got, almost like a full month of September, obviously still staying in the unit. He's going to look at another 3 to 4 months potentially. If they speed it up, great. If not, you're looking at that time frame in order to have your N12 heard. And now what's to prevent him from telling the adjudicator once again that he doesn't know how to read and write?
Right. And that's our challenge is now you've left us in a position where how do we even serve a notice to this tenant? If your excuse is, even if you give him a notice, he's illiterate, he doesn't understand it, it doesn't apply. Like, how does that work?
Wow, that's all I can say. Super frustrating, unbelievable. I liked what you said, Sharon, about how it's not even the landlord tenant board; it's just the tenant board, because that's exactly what it is. I'd love to take that little snippet of you talking at the start there, and to just show that to some of the politicians that are running, and so they can see how slanted everything is. In my mind, you did everything right. You know, and to answer your question, I don't know what the answer is. If you're like I would be inclined, and I don't even know if you can get away with this. I would want to talk to some other legal professionals, but are you maybe giving the next form and video recording yourself explaining what the form means?
And right. And it's funny because when my daughter originally served the form, I asked her, what did you say? And she told me, she goes, I showed him exactly, it's end of tenancy. We went over the form. His daughter was there. So I'm in agreement with you. The only thing is to record it. Now, is it legal to record without someone's permission? This person now realizes that if he lies and he's sneaky, he might get through, right? So we need to determine I think that it should be recorded. And as long as we can legally do that, that's exactly what we'll do. And we're also thinking that we'll bring a third party that has nothing to gain from our situation into the mix, so they can see us and witness the delivery and the conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Even if I'd be curious to what legal advice would be if at the start of the recording, if you were to say, with your permission, I'd like to record and make sure that you understand what is on this agreement that I'm handing to you. Mm-hmm. So either A, they're going to agree and say, yes, it's fine to record, which great. Or B, they're going to say, no, I don't give you permission to record. And at least you have that where you said, look, I tried to make sure they understood. And you can see here that they're saying no, that they wouldn't allow me to record. So how do you expect me to prove that they know and understand? And the other thing that I'm curious about is they've been there for 10 years. Yeah. They've been corresponding with you, I presume, through text, through emails. They clearly understood that. When he signed an initial rental agreement, they understood that. So now if the N12 is not valid because they didn't understand, well, you can't have it both ways. Did the initial rental agreement, did they not understand that? And that's not valid. Right.
And it's funny you say that because we've got a number of property managers from the past who have also dealt with this tenant on our behalf, who will confirm that they have never, ever heard him say that he's illiterate, and they've never had a problem communicating with him in a way that he could understand. So, and I think another bias that I think I saw come out is my husband and I are both from the Caribbean. Our tenant is also from an island, well, not an island, from British Guyana. And in British Guyana, they have an accent, but English is their first language. And the adjudicator was speaking to him as if English was not his first language. He is very heavily accented, but he completely understands, right? He just speaks English a little different. So I saw that bias coming out. I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? And there was no questions. Like if you're going to declare someone illiterate, I don't even know how you can do that without evidence. This tenant presented absolutely no evidence. The only thing he said is that I do not understand.
And he can certainly understand how to apply for a stay.
Right.
Not many people, even like for normal, can apply for a stay. But you have that concept of where she got the concept of, oh, he thought it was a rental agreement. Like, how do you get that when he's been there for 10 years? She's not asking those type of questions. No. And again, we go back into, if you're saying that you can't read and write and you need help from your daughter, or you need help from your friends, how come we don't have a power of attorney over you?
Exactly.
The power of attorney, and then we will go with this at a later date, but we need you to show us a power of attorney to prove what you're saying.
Right.
And this is where, again, I think the background of these adjudicators are definitely weighing heavily on their decisions with the Landlord and Tenant Board. And they're like, I know we shouldn't be, beggars can't be choosers. We needed a supply, but they are picking the wrong people to represent and hear these cases.
Right.
So these cases most of these cases shouldn't even have to go to the Landlord and Tenant Board for a hearing, especially for N12 applications.
Right.
When you're signing your affidavits, the punishment is there, the fine is there. They have ways in order to track down the landlord, not like the landlord tracking down the tenant, but we have to show different situations. So I don't know. I got to see Chris from the Alberta landlord community giving us a chat here. He's saying hi everyone from Alberta, and again, Alberta is awesome. We have Tom. He had messaged me because I don't know how come I'm not seeing a lot of the comments here, so we'll try to answer them after. And Tom said in Ontario we have a one-party consent for auto recording. So as long as you're in that conversation, that you're going to be able to have the consent into recording that information to bring it to the Landlord and Tenant Board. But again, why do we have to do this? You know, we're providing a service, we are being able to, you know, do whatever we can to, but if you make it this difficult and you're making it look like any application at the Landlord and Tenant Board now could be thrown out. If an N11 can, I hate to do what everything else is. And this is where you are continuing to have a backlog, and you're continuing to show that there's no access to justice for both parties at the board, and you might as well change the name to the tenant board.
And the other thing, that the adjudicator also asked my husband if he's been bullying the tenant, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. She did. She asked, have you been bullying this tenant? And I thought, seriously, she just said that. My husband has been bending over backwards for this tenant. He has, like I said, the rent doesn't even cover our expenses. We gave him many years notice so he could take his time to find his way out. He kept assuring us that his intent was to buy something else and move out himself. Like, for her to make that comment was just, in my opinion, another indication of the bias towards landlords. They think that she treated us as if we were bullies and liars, which we're not. We really believe in treating the tenants fairly, right? And sometimes going above and beyond. And I know in every group there are some bad eggs. We're not bad eggs. So don't come in assuming immediately that we are.
Yeah. This is ridiculous. And I've seen it too on an N12 application where they are literally feeding the tenants, asking them the question and then giving them examples. And it's like, shush it. Like, obviously they're going to pick any sample that you're taking there. Like, why you say you're supposed to be neutral. This is why they have legal aid prior to the hearing. How come you're now feeding them this? This is not practical. This is not following their own rules of procedures. And I'm going to guide you, Sharon, on how we can like formally make that complaint with the ombudsman, because I know they're actively investigating. It's great that they're trying to get that process sped up. We're supposed to see hearings now between 4 to 6 weeks by the end of the year, based on them hiring and changing the rules of procedures and having this tribunal portal, which, God, I don't even know what that looks like yet. But we do have a problem here that we're not giving access to both parties, and this is completely it needs to be shared. And we want to have anyone who has this type of experience. Like, we always get into what we're dealing with our tenants on usually our landlord live chats, but we're not diving deep into how the adjudicators are, what their background is, what they've thrown out, what is actually working with other landlords. We've had, side-by-side semis. We have one adjudicator handling the one tenant, another adjudicator handling the other tenant. The one adjudicator had issued an eviction on the N12 for one side of the property, and then the other adjudicator needed more information on the owner's parents who were going to move into it, and she wasn't going to grant an eviction until she got that information. And still there's a delay on the order, but the order came in for the other one. And I'm like, it's one property. It's the same. Like, why are we having two adjudicators, and why are we still waiting? And the sale of the property is now on hold, and the landlord's now risking, legal action against them if they can't get the deal to close. But we now have this adjudicator spending this much time and effort on an N12 when they sign the affidavits that they're going to use it for their own personal use. Yeah. All right, guys, we're at the hour. I want to thank everyone for having this chat with me. As you can see, I get so passionate. I don't like the fact that we have a broken system, but I want to make sure all of our landlords are getting protected and making sure you know about these problems. So if you know what to expect, you can kind of almost prepare for them. You can't completely prepare, but we just have to do whatever we can to prepare for it, and make sure that you guys are being part of Landlord Credit Bureau. I can't stress enough how the screening mechanism that's going to be used in there, changing the behavior of our tenants, rewarding our good tenants, being a part of that community. And our members, we do get a membership, a discount membership of OL with 15% off for OLW 15. So check them out at landlordcreditbureau.ca or .com if you're in the States or if you're in Canada, and make sure you're a part of it. We can't be spending our time, hoping and praying that everything is going to happen at the provincial level or at the Landlord and Tenant Board. We do need to look at different products of services and in order to help us be better landlords and to protect us. But when you're in the group, please be courteous to each other. We have new landlords, we have experienced landlords. We're here to help each other. There's no question is a dumb question. You really need to just be supportive in order to help guide each other through this process. And back when I started, there wasn't many support groups out there for landlords, and everyone knows that I'm the first one to dive deep into a phone call or a message and try to guide you through whatever knowledge I've been able to experience. And I know that we have to continue to be that squeaky wheel that gets the grease. You still have to contact your elected officials. You tell them that your rent is going up because of the system that you currently have. And Sharon, we're going to be working on this one together. One, to get that N12 rolling out, because obviously it's got to happen regardless. And number two is to just appeal it for the grounds of appealing it, and knowing that there should be an investigation on this adjudicator and set that precedence to other adjudicators that you should be very cautious on how you're ruling and make sure that it is fair to both parties. Yeah. Now, before I leave, I would like you guys to send out, if you got a tip or a trick or, just a way for someone to contact you, if you want them to contact you, give us a going away goodbye.
So yeah, thanks again for having me, Kayla. And I think having these kind of discussions is so helpful because we can all learn from other people's experiences. So thank you for putting this on. And Sharon, stay strong. You've got a lot of other landlords out here that have your back. So if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate you sharing your story as well. So to reach me, I've got my handle there. That's my Instagram and Facebook. I post a lot on Instagram. You can follow my adventures there. That's a great way to reach me, or I can be reached by email at dean@cbn.on.ca. So that's dean@CaldwellBankerNewman, cbn.on.ca.
Perfect. Sharon, what kind of tip? You got any advice that you want to give our viewers tonight?
First of all, I am so grateful, actually, Kayla, that we made your acquaintance and for giving us a voice today. This is not really something that I expected, and this is not something that I've done before. So thank you for that. And my tip is do seek advice. So if you're a new landlord or a small landlord like myself, seek advice. Reach out to people like Dean who have the experience and people like Kayla who have the experience that can help you through the process, because it really does make a difference. And even with that knowledge, make sure you yourself are also researching what your responsibilities are as a landlord and continually learning more and keeping up to date.
Perfect. You said it, and you guys did great. It's when something's coming from your heart and what is right and what is wrong. And I've always been that person that I have to speak up for the people who can't speak up for themselves. Yeah. And I'm glad that you were able to share your story here today, because so many people are afraid to. And I'm glad that you were able to get your voice out there and continue to fight, because this is a business that's worth getting into. We just need to make sure that we step up our screening process. We look at those products and the tools around us and be very, very involved when it comes down to how involved our elected officials are in this industry, and be on your toes. Anyone who's knows what we stand for and knows what we are as a group and as an organization, invite them into the Ontario Landlords Watch group. You can follow our Ontario Landlords Watch public page, all of our live videos and any interview, podcast, Zoom meetings that I'm a part of. And I want to thank all of those fantastic real estate influencers for having me on their channels in order to help me spread this awareness. So all of that will be on Ontario Landlords Watch YouTube channel. So hit subscribe over there so that you can stay in the loop of what interviews we're doing, what information is coming out, and make sure that you're contacting the Ontario Ombudsman, contact your MPP, and make sure that you're fighting back. Don't let it sit there, and just make sure that you're being very, very careful on who we're renting to. And it's sad that we have to do that, because we know many people are needing homes, but we have such a broken system, and until it gets fixed, we do have to look out for the best interests of ourselves and our family and our investments. But we still want to work with our elected officials, and we know we can create a better, fair and balanced housing system that will protect good landlords, good tenants, and taxpayers. I want to thank everyone so much for being a part of this broadcast tonight. We will be back again, I'm sure, because there's lots of changes happening, and we want to keep everyone in the loop. And most importantly, we want to hear your issues and your solutions, so together we can create that better system. Until we meet again, happy renting, guys.
Thanks, Kayla.